What's up?
Hey.
Hi. How are you? Nice sticker.
Woo! I know. So excited to be on your show. I
Thanks.
mean, the your your influence in the industry is huge, and I'm super honored
Oh, thank
that
you.
you asked me to be on here.
Of
Um,
course. I think we were having beers Day to Day Texas. I think we're like, you should be on the podcast. So
a very nice gathering of nerds.
it
Yeah.
is. It is. I'm
We
glad
had
to.
really good discussions there. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. A lot. Yeah, can't wait to make it back next year. But to kick things off, for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
I'm Sarah McKenna. I'm CEO of Sequentum. We have a platform for industrial scale web scraping. We've also done a lot of thought leadership in web scraping standards. Um, and we're just super excited about where this industry is going.
That's cool. And web scraping is something I'm a noob at. So maybe you can educate me. Part of the reason I like to do these podcasts just because I get to learn from smart people who are doing cool stuff. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So web scraping is taking data, mostly real time feeds is what we do, but you can also just create databases of data, but you're pulling it from the open web. And there's two different ways to pull data. You can crawl. That's what Google or Common Crawl does, where they'll pull everything down from a website. Or you can do what we call scraping, which is very targeted. So, for example, you may be interested in, you know, what's how many Tesla charging stations there are and how that map evolves over time.
Hmm.
So you'll just go to the Tesla site and scrape the map and pull down, all the locations and whether they're online. Um, and that's its own interesting sort of data set, right? And then you can use that to drive, models of, Tesla adoption and sort of radiuses of where, how far Teslas can drive, and in the finance industry, which is um, a lot of our customers, you can use it to assess sort of where Tesla is headed, where the stock is headed, whether there's a positive signal or a negative signal. It's
Interesting.
very, very interesting. We have NGOs also as customers that are
Hmm.
using web scraping to detect hate speech and locations of hate speech and sort of the terminology using. We have government agencies that are using it to fight human trafficking.
Wow.
Um, there's certain terms that are used when people are sort of abusing trafficked humans, and so they search for those. They search certain forums and different areas where these folks tend to gather. It's usually out in plain sight, um, and so
Interesting.
there's all these different use cases with web scraping, and so because it's so broadly applicable, we have a generic platform that makes it super easy.
That's interesting.
Hmm.
How did you get into web scraping?
Yeah, so um, I was actually recruited into web scraping as had become known as this very nerdy person who had sort of my own platform for very large scale automation, which I developed over decades working at startups in every industry and every technology, but doing automated quality assurance,
No.
software quality assurance. So basically, doing data driven testing. So developing huge data sets and flowing them through whatever the software was, using all the automation to spin up environments, um, and to basically do everything that someone is going to do on whatever the tech is. So we did ads in video games, we did ed tech, we did homeland security software, we did, all kinds of very interesting applications. And then I was eventually recruited by a private equity firm that had bought a scraping company.
Hmm.
Um, and I was like, isn't scraping illegal? Like what, And they said, no, no, no. We're just, it's a straight up automation problem. We're blocked on everything. We have this amazing business. They had 3,000 sites they were pulling data from, driving, pricing algorithms and yield algorithms on all the travel sites. And typical private equity, they'd fired everybody and nothing worked anymore. So, you know, they got the quality assurance, they got that, very, very disciplined 3 week sprint methodology, release every 3 weeks, fix, 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 fix. And we were unblocked on everything within, like 2 weeks or something. It wasn't that complicated,
Hmm.
um, but that's how it happened. And then all of a sudden, I was in this world of alt data in New York City. And actually, before I went into tech, I had worked at a hedge fund.
Hmm.
And so I was very familiar with um, how that whole world worked. And I just sort of looked around and thought, my God, all my worlds have collided. I want to go into this world of alt data. And, yeah.
Describe alt data.
Yeah, so alt data was a term that was coined by someone in New York who's worked in the finance industry, providing research, data-driven research for investment advice, called GeneXter. And it's basically the traditional data were earnings reports and those calls that companies do, public companies, around the time that they release the earnings. Those are considered traditional data. So then alt data was, whatever sources you could find on the internet. So for a
Hmm.
while, for example, Domino's used to increment their order numbers.
Oh.
So if you ordered a pizza, you would get an order number, and it was incremental. So you could write a scraper that basically determined how many orders they were getting.
Was
And
that on a per store basis or was that a global number?
So I wasn't
Okay.
part of the industry at the time, so I don't really know.
Yeah.
But I mean, so then they're not doing that anymore. But
I'll need to pull up
a
a
lot of
Domino's receipt.
what you had originally, right back in the '90s, we were taking all these companies online and building all the
Yeah.
tech to automate their businesses. And once they were all online, then you had this other business where you could take all the data that you could pull from these online businesses and you could drive either supply chain efficiencies or investment strategies or whatever it was. So alt data referred to all of the data that you can pull to give you a signal, either positive signal or negative signal, in where a stock was headed.
That's interesting. Yeah, because when I have other friends in New York, and it's
Mm-hmm.
I always hear the term alt data, but it seems like it's a very particular thing that I don't know if it's just me mentally attaching it to New York or if there's other geographies that do this as well. But I know
Well,
quite a few people in the alt data scene
Well,
there.
we have our own, like, right. It was probably around, I think around 2013, 2015, it kind of exploded out in the open. And so we have really well heeled, very, very sophisticated data people in New York City
Hmm.
because it's driving algorithmic trading of,
Right.
enormous sums of money and probably not more than 95% of investment decisions are data driven now.
Hmm.
Um, and people are trying to change the word alt data. They're trying to use sort of external data. That's all these different terms, but it's not sticking. And alt data isn't just web data. It's
Right.
also weather data and IoT data and transaction data, credit card transaction data and, all kinds of, there's different data
Satellites, I think, is
sources,
another one.
satellite, yeah, all the app data.
Yeah.
There's all those SDKs that apps can integrate in order to help monetize what they're doing, and
Oh yeah.
but
I recently just did a cleanup of my privacy profile, so I actually moved. Um, yeah, for that reason, right? I mean, I was just like I don't know. I go through these fits every couple of years. And I'm like, I just want to be anonymized. So did a bunch of things. I won't say what, but might include networking changes and masking and all this other stuff. And like, I'm just tired because I'd be on my phone. I'd be talking to my wife about getting I don't know weightlifting shoes for her or something. And then all of a sudden on Instagram, immediately I see an ad for the same thing, and we're just talking, by the way. and
Yeah, yeah.
she saw the same
No,
thing. I'm just like, this is creepy. I don't like this.
no, it's the those SDKs that get integrated into these apps. Like, and I'm not sure that the apps necessarily realize it, but when you're installing an app, it's asking you for permission for your microphone and other things. You have to
Hmm.
say no.
Yep.
Um, Otherwise, you're being listened to. It's really happening, right?
Yeah.
It's not, yeah. And the other thing is online, it used to be that cookies were tracking you, but now they're using kind of the same mechanisms that they're using to identify bots are they're using to identify people. Um, and so it's kind of a cookieless tracking world.
Is that IP
Um,
based or what is that?
No. So
Oh.
it's based on what's in your browser. So if you have in your browser, when you go to a website that has a new font, it downloads that font so that it can display how the
Mm,
website wants it to display, and it needs to know if you have that font installed or not. And actually, that font list is in order.
mm,
And it's the same with plugins. And there's basically thousands of variables about your environment. So taken collectively, you can put it into a hash that uniquely identifies your machine.
right.
And then that same hash applies to your Gmail, applies to your Facebook, applies to your LinkedIn, and they've got everything. So when you say that you're thinking about privacy, right, it's one thing to go through a VPN, that's really only masking kind of
Yeah.
your IP or proxy or something like that, but it's not masking what's going on inside your browser.
Right.
So for that, you need like a privacy browser,
Yeah.
which is interesting. That's kind of like when I went from software testing to scraping, it was kind of two sides of the same coin. And to go from scraping, like it would be very interesting to flip over to that and just go to privacy browser, because right now, right when we go to a website, like it may be protected by Cloudflare or whatever it is. Like
Right.
they just see us as a normal human because we're unique in every way.
Yeah, I did adopt a privacy browser as well. So,
Hmm.
'cause- yeah,
Yeah,
it was just
yeah,
getting
that's
creepy,
good.
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm still not convinced it's gonna do anything, but we'll see. Yeah,
It's a cat
it's
and mouse game,
yeah,
right? They're going to find more variables and more ways to track you, and then the privacy browser folks are going to find more ways to randomize, and yeah, it's the same thing that goes on between scrapers and bot blocking companies.
Mm. Walk me through that. Like, what is this cat and mouse game with the scraping and
Yeah, it's interesting. So we actually do a lot of work on standards because we don't think that bot blocking works at all.
mm,
As long as your data on your website is intended to be consumed by human beings, then you're not going to block a bot, right? Whatever you're doing to try to identify bot behaviors will just be finesse so it looks like a human.
right,
And so there's hundreds of millions of dollars that are going into bot blocking services because it's expensive to shoulder all those bots on your website. You want to, block as many as you can. And also, if you're selling ads, right, you want
right,
to make sure that these are actual real humans. So you really want to show, I have these state of the art, bot blocking services, and therefore whatever traffic is looking at these ads is real, and you should pay me for these ads, right? But the truth is that the bots are not blocked, as you know very well. And the game is changing pretty quickly, right?
mm,
Websites actually want to be discovered by intelligent agents. So things are actually really, really changing now. So AI is introducing more advanced forms of bot blocking, uh, where it's adjusting on the fly, right? But it doesn't work. If you have a really good platform, you're not blocked on anything.
It's got me thinking with AI agents and AI. I guess the incentive to maybe, I'm guessing one incentive for this is that you want your data maybe included in a ChatGPT result, sort of like SEO used to be the thing, and now it's um,
Yeah,
AI
Joe, we're
optimization. AI,
seeing
yeah.
so much inbound from the chatbots. Our SEO has never been good. We're bootstrapped and we have never really focused on our website or SEO. And I mean, I guess we had enough business. We were happy. Um, but we're getting a lot of credence from the chatbots. Where
Mm,
they're like, yes, a quantum is a leading, web scraping platform. You want to get, like we have like 800 pages of, our manual for our on-prem software, our manual for our cloud software. Like, that's, I guess, what it's, you know, learning how it's learning about, who we are and what we do.
that's interesting.
It's
Do you
incredible.
foresee a? I mean, it just got me thinking that there's definitely a scenario where I'm sure this is already happening, but using LLMs to actually generate content on the fly for the specific bot that's on your
I think
page.
Cloudflare is doing that. That's part of their bot blocking. So for not for
Interesting.
scrapers, but for crawlers,
Yeah.
that just sort of take everything. They're creating endless gobbledygook data on the fly that just tie up crawlers and spend all their resources and create a lot of garbage,
Clever.
right? And that's part of how they're, that's part of the bot blocking strategy. There's always strategies like that. Google had like, they would put out sort of wrong prices,
Oh,
right? They would just, come out with prices that were wrong, but you would always, there was always something about it that you knew, oh, they've detected you somehow, and we would then, just do something and get the right prices. But it was, it's interesting. They've always had strategies
yeah.
like that. But the strategy to really make it expensive for you, like Google recently changed their the search pages to require a full browser, and that really broke a lot of companies, SEO companies that were doing search rankings, because they can't operate a browser or it's too expensive. They can't do it efficiently or
What
cleanly.
does it mean by full
Fail.
browser? What is that?
So when you're pulling data from a website, you part of what you need to do is establish a session. There's
Yeah.
probably some beautiful, rich JavaScript front end. So you've got to download those objects, instantiate them, compile them, instantiate them on your client. You have to have a rich client, and then you have to do whatever it is to establish that session. And then after you do that very expensive piece of work, then you can switch to what we call a parser mode, which is instead of pinning the CPU like a browser tab does, it's just a single thread. So you can run like 100 of them concurrently. It's very light on the website, very light on your hardware. But you have to have that full browser instance at some point to establish a proper session.
Hmm.
And and that's where a lot of these scraping platforms really struggle. You have like companies like BrowserBase or Browserless or BrowserUse, or there's all these different companies that are just the browser. Send us whatever the request is to instantiate the full browser, and we'll give you back everything that
Hmm.
happens, and then you can deal with it at your end. And so we think that's really slow and inefficient. We just do everything all integrated, but you need that full browser to establish a proper human relationship with that website from the get-go.
Interesting.
Hmm. Did that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It does make
A
sense.
little bit nerdy.
Oh well, it's welcome to the show. Um,
I know it heard.
yeah. So walk me through this. I'm a noob. Like I want to get into web scraping. What do I do? Like I want to scrape like maybe certain elements off a site. One thing. Okay, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Right. So one thing
Hmm.
I've wanted to do. I just haven't gotten around to actually building it. Shouldn't take too long. But like I just want to check my book ranking on Amazon every hour and just see how it's doing, and just
Oh my God,
Compile
so
it.
easy.
It's easy, right? It should be easy. I could do this in
I
45
can
minutes.
point and click and give you that in 2 minutes.
Right. That's
Yeah,
easy. But
basically,
say that I wanted
yeah.
to build this from scratch. Like how would I build this and automate it?
So if you're doing it on Sequentum, you don't have to worry about like choosing open source tools or anything like that. We're actually completely closed source, like bucking the trend, but you kind of want to be when you're dealing with bot blocking. You'd like it to be closed source so that they're not pouring over your code.
Yeah.
But basically, you just log in, point click, load the URL in the browser, click on the elements that you want, and then you're going to deliver to an email, right? There's different delivery
Hmm.
endpoints, so you choose the email one, and then you schedule it, and you're done. So it's pretty
That's
simple.
easy. Yeah.
If you're doing open source tools, then you're going to, choose your open source tool, you're going to download it, you're going to set it up, you're going to have to integrate servers and proxies, and you do all these different things, right? If you're getting your Amazon ranking, right, they have, blocking on their site, so you're going to have to deal with that and figure out you know, um, how to get past that. And it's going to take a lot more time to set up and
Hmm.
maintain. But
Yeah, I guess the one hesitation that I didn't want to do this, at
yeah,
least from my house, is because I don't want my IP getting blocked by Amazon, and then I can't use the site. So,
yeah, yeah. I used to get that years ago when we first were figuring out this new bot blocking at the time. I used to get blocked from my IP, home IP, anytime
yep.
I went to Cathay Pacific, which I thought was hilarious. Um, but yeah, no, that does happen. Yeah, I mean, you want so you use proxies.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like network. It's a way to proxy your requests through any IP. So, for example, if you want to track banana prices globally, um, then you're going to need local IPs for every grocery store
Right.
to get a local price, right? So you need those proxies, for a lot of functional reasons, not just to rotate and avoid blocking,
Yeah.
but yeah. So like if you go to a platform like ours, like that stuff is all built in, and
All
you
the
don't
proxies
really
are
need
already
to think
there.
about it too much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's the reason I did because I started thinking through the network implications. I'm like, I just don't have time to. I mean, this would take me like 2 minutes to build. I'm just like, I don't want to deal with it. So, like, because
Yeah.
I mean, you can write it in Python pretty easy, but then it's like, okay, that's the easy part. Is like the scraping, the proxy part, like you say, and the IPs. Like, he's like, I don't
And
have
then
time to
as
deal with
soon
this
as
shit.
Amazon's like, I'm not going to allow anything on my site without a full browser, and then you need a full
Right.
browser, and then it becomes this like you're spending hours maintaining it.
That's
Yeah.
just it. Yeah. It's like, is it worth? Yeah. I was like,
I'll
never.
I'll configure it in 2 minutes after this call and
Well, thanks. That'd be all right.
email
Thank
it to
you.
you.
Oh, that'd be nice of you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like how back to the topic of AI, like how is this changing the game of web scraping right now? How is AI changing it?
Yeah, so AI is the best thing that ever happened to us. We were always delivering this data into these very well-heeled, teams with, machine learning engineers and, lots of hardware, and then ChatGPT came out, and we were like, oh my God, we can finally do AI. As a bootstrapped company, we could do AI. And by February in 2023, we had our first intelligent agent. So we're taking web
Dang.
data, we're, wrapping around the LLM and adding all of our, signature, trust building validation checks and verifications and, all of this stuff that, quality assurance nerds would think about. Um, and we went live with a intelligent agent and risk alerts. So upload your list of companies. If there's a cyber breach, fraud, or litigation, you're going to be notified.
Oh,
And it has been running autonomously with incredible fidelity, basically since Q2 of 2023, and we're building more and more. It's incredible. It's so powerful. Um, but the thing about it, and this was another thing that I appreciated so much about the day-to-day Texas
Yeah.
event, is I got to meet the founder of BAML, Vaibhav
Oh, yeah.
Gupta.
Yep.
Yeah, and so he has this really smart way of combining the LLM, which is very free flowing, very open, with sort of strict schema. He calls it coercion, um, but really enforcing a strict schema.
Hmm.
And when you take an approach like that in scraping, you can get tremendous amounts done in an incredibly brief time period. So, for example, somebody just came to us and said, one of our customers, and said, "Oh, one of your competitors is doing something with AI. Give me a daily alert on XYZ." And we were like, and just configured it immediately with AI and like sent them a beautiful email. Like with it took us like a few hours to just configure it and fuss over it to make it, really good. And they were like, "Wait, what? This works already? How, what?" And it's really affordable and it works really well. So, but the thing about it is that and I think this is where the AI-led scraping platforms are kind of struggling, is that you still need all of the thousands of sort of edge cases that come up on the internet, right? Handled.
Mm.
So Sequentum has been around for 17 years, and we've built just, just enormous numbers of, features with no AI at all that
Right.
just work. They're bulletproofed. And so you kind of need that industrial scale underpinning the AI. So we're adding the sort of very targeted and super checked, right? Because we don't trust AI to be, all that good. Even like Vibe stuff, like you saw his demo there. He was like, and it never gets this field. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So you do it a couple different ways. You have all your validations and your checks and balances, right? And you come up with something that is 99.9% accurate. Um, so, yeah, for us, there's just tremendous ways that you can harness AI to simplify, streamline, um, and, but to really get that scale, you still need that sort of atomic level customization that we have. And those pipes like to just really super scale, like we just do incredible volume. Um,
You brought up an interesting point. Like, how do you assess the quality of the data that you've scraped?
oh my God, I could go on and on. Tell me if I'm talking too much.
Oh no, this is a please do.
So yeah, so when I was brought into this company, right, I was recruited by World Quant Ventures, which is a quant fund, and they were doing algorithmic trading, and 40% of the data was web data, and they found these guys that had started Sequentum, and they had this little engine that had the custom browser, which you need to get past the bot blocking, and then they had the point-click interface with the customization scripting engine. So you had sort of the best of all worlds. But they didn't have a platform, and they didn't have large scale automation, and they didn't have any experience running like very large scale scraping, which I had been doing at this company, um, the previous company for the travel data for 3 years or something. Just got them to 99.9%. But anyway, so what we did, the first thing I did was to basically spec out how do you actually run and scale a scraping operation, right? Web data is
Mm.
notoriously difficult. Websites don't want you scraping from them. The proxy companies are flaky and they fail. The network requests are failing. The pages themselves, even when you're in a browser, you go to load a web page and it fails sometimes, or parts of the page fail to load, right? There's all of these problems, right? Your own servers could be overloaded, your networks could be overloaded. It's just endless. And not only that, but once you write the beautiful scraper that works, they could change their website and it could not work, right? 5 minutes later,
Hmm.
right? So it's this very notoriously difficult field. Um, and so the way we approached it was in the, very much in the vein of, agile methodology. And we're doing the shift left conference tomorrow with you. So I'm going to really get
Yeah.
into details here. You're doing it as well as we are, but it's with the Gable. Um,
Yeah.
and, so basically we basically create the acceptance criteria up front. So what are the volumes of requests? What are the number of thresholds of errors that are acceptable? And then every field of every row of data collected. I mean, you can configure as many validations as you want. You can have 80 validations per field if you want. Syntax, format, um, range of values, all kinds of things. Like if it's a VIN number, then you can have regex, making sure that it conforms to the syntax of a VIN number. If it's a date, then you better confirm that date format, because every proxy from a different geo is going to get a different date format, right? So there's all these things, and we would have we basically put in. Oh, and it's very difficult to configure, right, and keep track of. So we put in a single screen that shows at the schema level all the rules per column in simple configurations, and then there's sort of the deduplication logic where you can define certain fields as key fields and define exactly what your deduplication logic is for that agent in particular. And then, of course, there's the scripting engine. We can create custom buckets and custom counters, and um, you can create all these nuances like in this column, there can be no nulls ever. But in this column, you can have nulls up to 5% of the time. But if it's 6 or 7 or 10%
Hmm.
of the time, I need an alert. And then we built in all the alerts and the ticketing, and the tickets will automatically be assigned to the agent, the person who's responsible for that agent. And we built all of this. So we built the entire sort of workflow into the platform. And then we built all the logging and troubleshooting capability and audit logs and governance and all version control, for, version control on the agent, version control on the input files, um, audit trails for any changes to schedule or frequency or rate limits or anything that is going to impact how that collection is running, and why it might not have run the same way. And then we create views for every stakeholder. So you break down all those silos. So everyone who's got a stake in that data, whether they're the data engineer or the ops manager or the data analyst or the portfolio manager in the case of finance, where they're making trading bets on this data, they can all see the changes over time. They can click through easily and see who changed what, when, and why. And there's tickets, and you can see the comments in the tickets, and you can see, in some cases, decisions that were made because of changes to the website, right? Some data isn't available anymore. Um, and this has been really successful, right? Basically took all of the best practices from the test automation world and applied it to data scraping.
Interesting.
Hmm.
How many fits and starts were this? Because I'm getting the impression that you had to home grow a lot of these solutions, or
Yeah.
is there like a secret cabal of web scrapers where you get together and share ideas, or how? Because I'm asking this because it seems like a very secretive industry where maybe not a lot of ideas are shared. Maybe I'm completely wrong,
Well,
but
I share all the time. I share quite
okay.
openly, but I work in standards groups also, where I'm constantly sharing. And there are extract conferences. So, like, I've spoken at the Zeit extract conference. I've spoken at the OxyLab extract conference. I've attended, other conferences. I'm going next month, and I'm going to speak at the Apify and Massive Extract Summit. And we all sort of share. Um, but yeah, I think that because there is such a very large open source community for web scraping, I think that um, a lot of people just don't follow the commercial vendors. So
Mm.
maybe they're listening, maybe they're not. We do have there's someone named Pierluigi. I'm blanking on his last name, but he started the Web Scraping Club, which is on LinkedIn.
Oh.
And I think that's pretty good. I can't get him to mention Sequentum. Like,
Mm.
I don't know why he mentions everyone else under the sun, but
Huh.
whatever, it's fine. Um, but that's a pretty good resource, I think.
Interesting.
That sort of popped up in the last, 12 or 15 months. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's secretive. It's
Okay.
not secretive to me, but I think that the, the number of players and the amount of noise has really gone through the roof. I think in the last year, because everyone is saying, "Oh my God, I'm able to scrape with an LLM," right? Which is like a financial disaster, right? It's way too much money. It's way too slow. It's way too inaccurate. Um,
So what's the advantage of using an LLM to scrape versus traditional ways? Or why
yeah,
would
I
people think
mean,
that's an advantage?
because it's just so easy.
Yeah.
You can go to OpenAI API. I think they just released this last week, and of course we like checked it out fully. Um, but they have like a web search API, and you can stick in
Yeah.
a URL and get information. It's like you're reading the web page,
Hmm.
um, which is nice, right? If that's your use case, and you just want to read a web page, that's really cool. Um, but it's so expensive. It's insanely expensive and slow, and it's also incredibly inaccurate. Um, it would miss, a third of the content on the page. Like it was
Hmm.
really bizarrely inaccurate in ways that, it's just not something you can do at industrial scale and trust. But people are excited about it because you can sort of stitch things together that you never could before. So it used to be really, really difficult to get, charts to data. We would get that request all the time. Can you do charts to data? And we could do this kind of chart or that kind of chart, but it was very, very difficult
What does it
to
mean,
get.
charts to data?
So if there's a visual of a chart, to be able to convert those bar charts from the X and Y values to convert it to a data set that can then be used,
Mm.
analyzed algorithmically.
Yeah.
Um, and we could do it for certain types of charts, but not for others. And it was like this very, it was just an area where we ended up spending a lot of, spinning our wheels sometimes, but spending a lot of cycles. And now with AI, it's like just so easy.
How would
So
it do like
easy.
a 3D donut chart? Would that work?
I mean, and if a human can determine what those values are, then the
Yeah.
LLM can. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that's a big difference. And PDFs are a lot easier as well.
Mm.
So pulling out, like those big scientific PDFs with big tables, and every table is different. The PDF spec is 2,000 pages long, and everything that prints a PDF, even if it's just digitally printed, they don't necessarily implement all 2,000 pages of that spec. Like if you're printing from Word, or you're printing from, whatever your application is that you're generating the PDF from, that PDF has a different structure. So now with LLMs that can just see the thing visually and make sense of
Hmm.
it, you can do so much more. It's just some things that were really hard are much easier now. But the
Oh
things
yeah.
that um, you can take it too far to where it's really slow and incredibly expensive, right? And that's where Sequentum is like, well, we're just creating little template commands for AI this and AI that, so you can harness all that power. But
Mm.
when it gets down to it, and you really just want threads running at scale with incredible accuracy and data validation every step of the way, like you really need an industrial scale scraping platform. And that's what these AI led, you know, scraping platforms don't have. So like you go to Browse AI, which I love their UI. I go there a lot. Um,
Check them out right now.
they have this really cute, they have this little little, you know, browse AI character, and you put in your URL and it spits back like a schema, and it's like everything that you could ever want, except that, if it's not like a single page site and you're just outputting it to CSV, then you can't make it work. Like
Mm.
it can, it's just, you can't, it doesn't browse pages, it doesn't navigate, it doesn't, it can't handle customization. It's like, they have to now build an actual scraping platform,
Mm.
you know, and they're all kind of this way. Like they're all raising, like I think browser use over the weekend raised $17 million, and you have like, browser base, they raised God knows what, right? And they're actually being used as the operator in Chat GPT, right? But
Mm.
try and use that, right? It gets blocked, it gets CAPTCHA, it gets, it can't navigate page. It's like all the same problems that I'm mentioning. Like they need an actual scraping platform to back it.
Oh yeah. Well, I
So
had
we'll
this last night.
see.
I was actually working on a some trademark stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm going to use the Claude web tool, and I'm going to use
Yeah.
ChatGPT's web tool, and let's see what it can come up with. I was just doing some. I was like, research uh, this mark, and tell me whether or not this is. I should be pursuing this as a trademark.
Yeah.
So I actually used Gemini as well. So it was really interesting. Claude and ChatGPT provided pretty quick results, and they said, "Yeah, go for it. It's
Hmm.
awesome." I'm like, "Cool, let's do it." Gemini, on the other hand, was interesting because it's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, you might be able to do it, you might not. I'm not sure. But it was
Hmm.
interesting seeing their data sources. So they would, and I used, yeah, one of them using kind of a chain of thought. So it was going through like, I'm going to go through these websites first. Oh crap, okay, I can't get to these sites. I'm going to try this other one here, and it started finding these pretty janky websites that Gemini did, which I thought was interesting. Um,
Hmm.
and then it turned this into some weird convoluted case law thing where I was like, I don't know. I think you because it's like somebody on Reddit said this, so you might not have the case to be able to trademark it. I'm like, I think you're wrong in this case because you can say anything you want on Reddit. It's not doesn't
Right.
have any commercial use. And so it's like, okay, so this, but it was interesting just seeing
Well,
its thought process of like what it was selecting because it went for the most obvious one, like the trademark site to Reddit.
yeah, well, that's the other thing that you can do, and this is where we're building more and more intelligent agents, and then as you bring them all together, you have that kind of planner agent. So the planner agent can go out and use something like that, and it can go and say, okay, well, if I want to go and get insights on XYZ from web data, so generate a plan for that. What sources can I pull from? Right? It's really good for that.
Mm-hmm.
So like when somebody calls me up, and it used to be they'd call me up and they would say, I want to, like I'd get a call from somebody in Turkey and say, I hear that you guys in New York are printing money at hedge funds and you're supplying them all. So what are the sources that they're pulling? And I'm like, I can't tell you that. Like, these guys have, they're spending $60 million a year on data sets. I have no idea what they're doing. Like,
Right.
I know like some small fraction of that, and I'm bound legally to not share their sources with
Right.
you. Like, but now when somebody calls me and says, I'm trying to, track down, they've got some idea of what to do with data. And I'm like, okay. And I just put it in ChatGPT and I sort of reflect back like, well, I guess you could, I can sort of create a proposal on the fly within, a matter of minutes. And we can sit there and look at all these data sources and look at schema, talk about schema. And by the end of the call, we have pretty concrete requirements,
Yeah.
right? Before ChatGPT, it took much longer.
Yeah.
So it's, and you can automate that process somewhat, um, and it's going to get better and better. So
Oh yeah.
it's kind of fantastic what you can do with the AI. Yeah, it's really exciting. And I
Oh
think the
yeah.
websites, because they want to be found by intelligent agents, I think the websites are actually making the blocking simpler.
What are the implications of scraping copyrighted data?
So we won't do it. So
Okay,
Quantum has operating guidelines that we will not scrape copyrighted data. That's part of our rules. We won't scrape personal data. We'll do facts only. So facts are defined as things like prices or product descriptions or recall information.
got it.
Um, that stuff is not copyrightable, but your book is copyrightable.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, and
there's a lot
it
of
ended up in LibGen, by the way, that Meta and OpenAI scraped. So
oh yeah,
yeah,
no, that I think we'll see what comes from, there's it's almost 50 lawsuits now.
yeah,
Um,
I was pretty pissed.
but Yeah, no, I mean it's I participate in all these standards groups, and we're trying to define a strategy to protect copyrighted works
Hmm.
and to basically bring value to authors like
Yeah,
such as yourself. I hope to write a book someday myself. We'll
that'd be
see.
great. You should.
But I'm involved with two different standards groups, and one of them is the Alliance for Responsible Data Collection. And the idea is basically, robots.txt doesn't work because people don't follow it, websites don't update it, even Google doesn't follow things like crawl delay and, different aspects of robots.txt. Um, cease and desist don't work because they have to detect you and know where to send it, and it's too hard
Right.
anyway. There's way too many bots. Terms and conditions doesn't work, right? It's not machine readable, and you're not exactly giving notice to anyone when it's updated, so it never holds up in court. And of course, the bot blocking doesn't work, right?
Mm,
If you're going to make the data available to humans, then bots are going to be able to have access to. Um, so the only way to really do it seems to be through driving the behavior of the data consumers.
yeah.
So our idea is, and we're working with the Croissant Working Group to formalize a spec for web data, and then we'll, of course, building the platform, and we're working with OpenAI and Common Crawl and others. Um, and the idea is basically to come up with a standard for how data can be collected. So what are you doing with your user agent? How are you making sure you're not putting too much volume on the sites? Um, you know, if that data is copyrighted, like what is that? Like there's all kinds of different standards around how to document if data is actually copyrighted. How do you capture all of that and include it with that croissant data set documentation standard? But basically, once you have a data set, you submit it to a certification body, and that body should be able to see how it was collected. There should be proper audit trails. There should be proper documentation so that then whoever's consuming that data to use it to train AI or whatever their purpose is, they can make choices about, oh, I'm going to use this data set, but not that one.
Mm,
Right. So, and then that certification process, if the data is copyrighted, right, there should be some way for copyright owners to register and participate in the value creation.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because as a content creator, that's a big question. Like, what is what's what's the future of right? So the current book I'm working on right now, like that's on Substack. A lot of the content's behind a paywall, right? So I mean, unless you're gonna, I don't know how you would scrape that. Maybe there's ways, but
Yeah, we won't log in or and we won't create fake accounts, right?
yeah,
So that's part of our operating guidelines as well. So if you're creating an account, you're signing terms and conditions, and that's a straight shot to a lawsuit, right?
yeah,
That's affirmative notice of terms, and for sure
hmm,
they're going to have something about scraping.
yeah,
And yeah, we won't do that. If someone
yeah,
gives us an account and asks us to automate something for them, we'll do that. But we're not going to
right,
create a fake account, and we're not going to,
yeah, yeah. Because I'm just thinking about what the future is for content creators. Um, yeah, I think you're gonna see more paywall type stuff. Like, well, one of my friends too, like well, he wrote a book. Nick Singh, he wrote Ace, a data science interview or whatever it is, and does really well on Amazon. But he only did the print version. He didn't do digital. He didn't do Kindle, which I thought was really
mm,
interesting. But the funny thing with
well,
that
I
is,
will.
it ended up
Mhm.
becoming a massive hit of a book. But the crazy part of the story is, people were selling used versions of his book, but they were like these spiral bound like photocopied books. So,
Yeah.
people. I guess the point is people are going to do shady stuff no matter how hard you try and avoid it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that guy Andrei Burkov that were like
Oh
the
yeah,
100-page machine learning. You know, like he's got a bunch of them. He's got the latest one. It's really good as well on basically training your own LLM. But at some point, I was in Quebec City, and I went to see him, and I took his book for him to sign,
oh
because we're nerds.
yeah.
And he took the book and he was like examining it because there were so many counterfeit copies out of China that were being sold on Amazon that
Wow,
had nothing to do with him, where they'd copied word for word verbatim his entire book and printed whole new versions of his book. And he was examining it, and he was like, I can't believe it, this is actually an authentic version of my book. And he's like, I'm happy to sign it. I was like, oh
that's
great.
super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I just ordered it off Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the same thing happen. I think there's a dozen fundamentals of data engineering books I counted over time. Like, well, the weirdest thing, it's completely unrelated to web scraping, but a week or two before our book was supposed to come out, before it was published, there was already a summary of the book that I downloaded. I'm like, I think but this is before ChatGPT, so I think they used like GPT-3 just to write something because it was clear a human didn't write this. It was the weirdest thing. Like SQL is a language used to query data and data. I don't write like this. This is the dumbest shit I've ever read in my life. But the
Mm.
crazy thing about that is the same company or the same publisher had other summary books of like Alex Jones's The Great Reset and all these like fringe right wing books, and then my book. It's like, what
Oh.
is it? Like, I don't know what they're trying to say with this, but this is kind of funny. But anyway, yeah, it's
I don't know what's going to happen, right?
yeah,
So I have to say, like, I'm super impressed at the knowledge that's out there about Sequentum through the chatbots.
that's
Like,
crazy.
we've
Let
gotten
me check that out
great
right now.
leads,
Actually, which one should I
great
try?
leads. I don't know, Perplexity, Chat
Let me see.
GPT,
What?
all of them, the Gemini, they all know about us. They know everything about us. It's fabulous.
What?
Um, and our SEO is terrible. If you try and search in Google, it was always like, Fivetran. They bought the name Sequentum for the last like 5 years. There's like you'd get Fivetran or you'd get Bright Data. You get like everyone who's bought our name in Google, and you get like a half page of that before you ever get to anything that points to us,
Oh, that's
which we were
hilarious.
like, oh,
So
how annoying.
Claude knows about you. Let me see
Mhm.
here. It says,
Yeah,
I
they
believe
all
Sequentum
do.
is a company that develops web scraping and data extraction software, with their main
Hmm.
product being enterprise data collection (EDC). Um,
What? No.
that's not true.
EDC? What is that?
That's what it says. EDC. I mean, it's
I've
also
never heard of
a
that.
rave, but which is used by businesses to gather information from websites. However, my information might be outdated since my knowledge cutoff is October 2024. Would you like me to search for more information about Sequentum? Yes. Okay, so now it's going to do a web search. I
Hmm.
should just share my screen here and so you
It's
can see what it's
hilarious.
doing.
EDC. I've never heard that one.
You don't do that. Oh, I can't do it because after the Riverside app won't let me share.
Hmm.
Okay, you've been around for 15 years. You have offices in the
Hmm.
U.S., Australia, and Asia.
Correct.
Provide services to Global 500 and Fortune 500 companies. Your main
Hmm.
products are Sequentum Enterprise, Sequentum Cloud, Managed Services, Sequentum Bespoke. Are these correct?
Yes.
Okay, but your main product is not enterprise data collection.
Not well, we do enterprise data collection, but there's no EDC acronym. We have Sequentum Enterprise, which is on-prem software, Sequentum Cloud,
Okay,
and then we have our,
let me
data
see.
as a service or managed service, whatever you want to call it, which
So,
takes the form of bespoke or data catalog or whatever you want to call it.
okay, so yeah, it combed a bunch of pages. Like I think I mean there's three of yours, one from share.com, Share, Benzinga, LinkedIn, a bunch more Sequentum than GetApp. And then I say, who are the leaders in web scraping? Based on my knowledge, some of the leading companies in web scraping are Sequentum. As
Yeah.
we discussed, they've been in business for 15 years. Bright Data. Um, Tell me if these are real companies. Scraping Hub, Zeit,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Diffbot,
yeah.
Octoparse,
These are all our buddies.
Parsehub, Scrape Hub.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so Claude's.
Yeah, I'm working with Bright Data at the Alliance for Responsible Data Collection. I've done co-presenting on standards with, the legal counsel of Zeit. Um, I've been to the Zeit Extract conference. I've spoken at it. We're all very friendly.
And ChatGPT
We're a
knows.
small world.
ChatGPT at least 4.0 knows who you are, right? So that's Uh, yeah. Are you? Then ask me at the end. Are you thinking of using it for a project, or is curious about what it does? Like it's a funny question at the end.
I
So,
know. They're always like trying to get you to continue.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going. Keep going.
Uh, um, I'd like to use it for a project. Let's see what it does. This is like some of the best advertising you could do. It's not passive search.
It
This is
really is. I can't tell you the leads we've gotten.
crazy.
It's fantastic.
So it's telling me
There's
why
some
you're a good.
way to, there's some way to seed I don't know. Someone's going to put a bunch of money into seeding the LLMs. They're going to say, how come Sequentum is listed as the best web scraper out there? Right. I don't know where it's getting it because our SEO is like non-existent. I mean, we don't, we should do something about that, but it's a
I would
bootstrap
say, maybe,
company.
I don't know.
You
I
got
don't
to
know if
prioritize.
I don't know if it's as important as it used to be though.
Yeah.
But I'm also taking, I'm looking at like what people like Neil Patel write on, so he's a big marketer, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we
I
actually
know
did
who
some
he
work
is.
with his firm a while ago. But like he's got some interesting posts where is SEO dead, potentially, right? Or it's not the same, like just because it's people's behaviors are different. But now it's more like making sure your pages are optimized for chatbots, right? Not humans.
Right, and
So
that's what's going to happen in web scraping, right? It's going to
yeah,
get easier, I think. Why
probably.
is somebody going to invest in a bot blocking solution if you want to be found by intelligent agents,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think
Yeah.
it's just going to.
Well, and the way
I'm
I solved that,
sorry
like I
for the
said, is
bot
I just
blocking
put
companies, but
yeah. The way I solved it was if you want the content, you can also just pay for it, and it's behind a paywall. Like I don't know unless Substack or somebody has a way that they or they're not careful, maybe that content is available. But as far as I know, it's not. But that's how I block the bots. I'm just like, fine, if you want to pay, it's cool. But if you
yeah, I
don't,
don't. I'm funny too. Like my LinkedIn is not public. Like if
okay,
you have a scraper to pull public data off LinkedIn, you're not going to find me. You're not going to
interesting.
find my whole job history or any. I consider that personal data. So,
Yeah,
you know,
smart.
I don't know if it's smart. Like
Well, it depends what you want to do, right?
right.
Like I'm a
Yeah.
public figure, so like like I even have my own knowledge panel on Google now right now. It's like you search for
Hmm.
my name and there's that thing plopped onto your page. So it depends on what you want. I don't know.
The side
I
panel,
didn't
that's
ask for this, but it
fantastic.
happened.
Yay. Yeah.
I go to Google one day. I'm like, oh, all right.
I remember I interviewed for a job one time for that side panel, and it was so interesting just talking about how to QA it. How do you QA the side panel? Like, who is important enough to get a side panel, and how do you QA the data, and where does the data come from? And, I didn't end up taking that job, but it was super interesting.
I've often wondered that actually, because I'm just like, so how do you determine like what gets on this? Because they had some posts from Reddit, which I was like, I don't know, whatever, and ends up being good advertising no matter what. But yeah, but you do have the ability to curate what's on your panel now, which is nice. So it's not just arbitrarily thrown together. Like these are what we think you identify as. So
Yeah, I remember getting a call from somebody at some point when I was sitting in my office. So location wise, I was in my office and I was trying to fix something on the side panel and someone called me and they were like, okay, we have you located at that address, confirm a couple more things and make sure you
okay,
represent Sequentum, send me an email. And I did. And then I was able to change all these things like in 5 minutes. It was incredible. I was super impressed. I was like, wow, you guys
oh
are
yeah.
really,
I mean, they're hardcore. Like they make you upload if you have a panel, like they'll make you upload an ID to make sure you are who you are, I suppose. Although I think with ChatGPT you could, but I think you have to use your photo with the ID in front of you is how they wanted to do it,
hmm.
your ID and you. So like this is my library card, but if you imagine that's my driver's license, you'd get the
Right.
idea. So, but that's how they wanted to do it.
It is kind of hardcore. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've only done it for the Sequentum side panel. I don't know about,
got it.
I don't have a persona on there.
Well, it says you block your LinkedIn. That's
Maybe I should
so
unblock it.
still get scraped and then you show up in all these weird results. So
Yeah.
Well, awesome. It's great chatting with you. I guess for people who want to learn more about you, how can they find you? And probably not on LinkedIn because it's private. Just kidding.
No, you can find me on LinkedIn
Yeah,
if
you're on
you're
LinkedIn.
logged in. You can find me. Yeah, Sarah McKenna, Sequentum. I'm on LinkedIn. Obviously there's a million ways to reach everybody these days. So if you just Google me, you can probably find my contact info.
Yeah, you're not as esoteric as Bill Murray. I've heard he has an 800 number.
Well, Sequentum has an 800 number. You can
You can
call that.
call there. So
Yeah.
well, awesome. Well, it was good to see you. Maybe I'll see you around in New York these
Absolutely.
next time.
Looking
So
forward. Thanks again.
yeah, of
Really
course. Take
appreciate
care.
it.
Yep.
All right. Bye.